everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by the legend himself, the host of the Liberty Report, and former Congressman, Dr. Ron Paul. And I wanted to quickly say, before we get into any issues, Dr. Paul, that on a personal note, Dr. Paul helped me to understand the message of liberty, individualism, voluntarism, the non-aggression principle back when I was about 13 in 2007. And it's been a long road since then, and I haven't looked back, so I really want to start off by thanking you, sir, for all you've done for the Liberty Movement, and secondly, welcome you to M.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be with you, and it's good to hear stories like that because I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
It's absolutely a domino effect, and you influence one person and they influence a few more, and it's incredible. But Dr. Paul, because we don't have too much time today, I wanted to get into the monetary system. Now, the fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the monetary system, so we can't put an exact date on it, but we know a fiat dollar crash is coming. Recently, Janet Yellen claimed that we will not see another major crisis in our lifetime, despite the unthinkable debt printing, devaluation, and inflation. So what are your thoughts on this delusion, Dr. Paul?
Well, it scares me because central bankers are always wrong on their predictions, especially right before a bust. So what she says shouldn't reassure anybody. And you're right, you can't predict the timing. The other day I was being interviewed, and I said I wouldn't be shocked, if the bust comes at by the end of this year. And some people wanted it to say that that's what I was predicting, but I think you asked the question correctly. You can know about a bust, you can know about a correction, you can know about all the sins of overspending and printing of money, but there is a subjective element to when people give up confidence, and that's what you're talking about. When is the day going to come when people become more realistic and realize that we're dealing with money that has no intrinsic value to it? There's too much debt and too much malinvestment, and it will come to an end. Something that's too good to believe. It usually is, and it usually ends. So, and that's what we have to anticipate. But one thing for sure, we're getting closer every day, and it may come this year, but it might take another year or two because the politicians have a way of promising. And now one reason why this bubble and our bubble that's driven by the dollar exists is because we are the reserve currency of the world. We are the richest country in the world. We have a military power standing behind us. So a lot of people put trust in that, and we're involved. We sort of control the financial system. But the real test is, can it sustain unbelievable deficit financing and the accumulation of debt? And it can't. You can't run a world. If that were the case, Americans could just sit back and say, hey, what the heck? Everybody wants our money, so we'll take our money. And that's the reason your assumption is correct. It will come to an end, picking the day. Actually, the longer it takes for it to hit, the better it is for us. The more we can get prepared personally, as well as prepare individuals to understanding what's going on, so they might pick the right course after that big calamity hits.
Absolutely. We decentralize, we collect sound money, ensure our wealth, and interestingly enough, every time people talk about the fiat system in the way that you do, people will say, oh, well, they've been saying that for years that it's going to crash. And I try to explain to them, well, of course we have, because it hasn't changed. It will collapse. Every fiat empire has fallen, and we're coming up on the 1,000th year anniversary of fiat, going back to 1024 AD in China. And you'd think after 1,000 years, people would get a grip, but apparently not. And with that said, I wanted to go into this implementation of a cashless system that we're watching in India, we're watching in Australia, China, in Canada to a good degree, where there seems to be this massive push to go cashless. And I've always seen this as kind of enslavement to the banking system, because if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. And if your money's always going through the banks through digital transactions and you never hold it, does that not mean you are in servitude to the banking system? So I was wondering your thoughts on this cashless society, and if we have to worry possibly about having this be implemented into the special drawing rights at the IMF.
Well, I think this notion and what's happening again, going more to cash, and India is doing that, but we're doing it too. There's a lot less cash being used in this country. I think it's a sign of the weakening of the system. It's also a sign that the authoritarians are clinging to power, and that means they have to know what everybody's doing, where everybody's money is, so that they can collect the revenues, collect the taxes, and make sure that you're not getting around the system. So that's what the cashless society is all about. But it won't work. Matter of fact, it might be the precipitating factor that people will eventually lose confidence when the crisis hits, because just in the they talk about, well, the crisis hasn't come. Well, in 08 and 09 was a pretty major crisis. The one thing we learned there was that the middle class got wiped out and the poor people got poorer, and now there's a lot of wealth going on, but it's still accumulating to the wealthy individual. That will continue, but eventually the cashless society will prompt people to be very knowledgeable about, well, we have to keep something out for this. So the governments actually make things worse, because people do prepare for bartering and trading. And of course, pure bartering is horrible, but if you have silver coins, it might tide you over a lot better. And people say, well, it might not come for another 10 years. Well, we don't know whether it's necessary. But one thing for sure, when a government embarks on deficit financing and then monetizing the debt, the value of commodities, especially gold and silver, generally goes up. I recognized this in 1971 and started buying gold at that time. And some people made fun of me, and they still do, say, oh yeah, but you're missing out on the stock market boom. But if you look at gold at $35 an ounce and now at $12.50 an ounce, it wasn't the worst form of protection, and I think that will continue. And we don't know. It won't be a tragedy if you get protected and you don't. The calamity isn't quite as bad as you think. But I think it's still a good way. I still expect that this system will not last. It will collapse. It always has in the past, and 6,000 years of history shows that, fiat money and cryptocurrencies, I do not believe that it can replace gold and silver.
No, it can't, and people should diversify, and I think people look to cryptocurrencies partly to invest rather than insurance of wealth with gold and silver. But just switching gears, you mentioned last year in an interview with RT that the shadow government may attempt to stage false flag attacks to bring Trump into war. We've seen more and more fear-mongering regarding Russia as the military-industrial complex seems to be getting ready for a global conflict and using the media to prop up their intentions. We've seen what appeared to be an obvious false flag attack in Syria, and now there is allegedly intelligence that for absolutely no reason at all, Assad plans to shoot himself in the foot by gassing more children. This is insanity, Dr. Paul. How can anyone believe this narrative, and what do you think is going on?
Well, I guess people get brainwashed, and the people who totally depend on the mainstream media will hear it over and over. And when you think about bashing Russia right now, or Iran, it's so overwhelming that it's bipartisan too. Yes, the two parties argue back and forth, but on the major issues of the Federal Reserve monetizing debt and the continued building up of the military and us policing the world, they don't really argue about that. I mean, the military budget just passed, I think, yesterday in the House or the Senate. There's never a problem with that. Usually there are about 20 of us that would oppose that, but that will continue. And but it's a psychological thing that people accept unless they come and listen to more programs like what you have and read the right things on the internet, because right now we have a better chance of counteracting these false notions than we ever had before, because when I started in politics, you had three major networks and there was a total monopoly. Now it's more challenging. I saw something interesting yesterday, and I happen to believe the story. They said that one of the reasons that Hillary lost was she was construed as the war candidate and Trump was the peace candidate, and we could, digest that a bit. But that is true. There's usually one who seemed to be more for peace, and Trump, talked about friendship with Russia and these things like that. And Hillary had a record. And I do believe that people are on our side on the war issue, and they're on our side on central banking and how the military-industrial complex rips us off and how corporatism really hurts the people. But the problem that we face is philosophic and educational, because they say, well, that's the free enterprise system. That's capitalism that gave us what you're complaining about. And that isn't true. What we have now is government welfare interventionism that gave this problem. And we have to prove to them that free markets is quite a bit different than what is happening and why there's such a discrepancy in wealth distribution. That principally has come about because of monetary policy by the Federal Reserve.
Absolutely. Mass destabilization of markets and economies always goes the same route. And I just can't help but think that there is a monetary reason to go to war or have a conflict of some sorts with Russia. And I just find it so insane because your son, Senator Rand Paul, is being called a Russian agent by John McCain for simply disagreeing on some very important issues. And I just feel like, are we getting to a point where we should expect constant, maybe information false flags or even military false flags in the near future that might actually bring us into war? Because all I see all day on television is just the perpetual hate Russia, go to war with Russia, we must attack Russia.
Yeah, well, we have to do whatever we can to counteract that. But in some ways, when they answer our challenges and our principles we believe in just by name calling, like you mentioned, John McCain called my son a Russian agent. Yeah, they should just be laughed at, because it's so ridiculous, and they lose credibility. I think right now there's a bunch of them out there. When you think about these arguments going on here in the States, with the CNN and different people, trying to tell the world what to do, I think they're losing credibility and they're losing viewers, and that's why truth wins out in the end. I believe that to be the case. Some days it's a little bit frustrating, but yes, they'll try anything. Sometimes it's not exactly a planned false flag, but it could be an accident, that they use. But there's many times in the news this whole idea of Assad poisoning his own people. It is so absurd. And then when they paint the Iranians as the chief architects of terrorism by the Saudis who have a reputation, they should be laughed at. But our job is to sort it all out and invite people to be more objective in their understanding of what's happening in world events.
Absolutely, and we continue to see terrorists get armed, and who knows who's arming them. A lot of red flags left and right, and obviously Donald Trump is showing himself to be an example of the fact that no matter who is president, there's still the CFR, there's still the Trilateral Commission, there's still these groups that are behind closed doors, and the deep state isn't just Obama holdovers, they're actual organizations, global organizations that are working to manipulate politics, to manipulate the markets, to manipulate the monetary system, and to manipulate the minds of the public. And just moving on just quickly from that, what do you think is a voluntarist bottom line? How do we get people to the message of voluntarism and away from this insane collective thinking?
Well, it's an educational effort that people have to come around to have a curiosity about understanding what individual rights mean. And the other day I had an interview and I was challenged because I have said, and I strongly believe, that people don't have a right to somebody else's stuff. So I've taken the position that individuals don't have a right to medical care, and that is so challenging to, humanitarianism. You mean to say, but when it's explained, and it has to be, however you can get the explanation out there. The other system that we're putting up with doesn't work very well. It costs too much money. It serves a special interest. Insurance companies and drug companies and on. And then ask them, well, you know, what happens if and when the bus comes? Do you think the people in Venezuela are very happy with their socialized medicine? And it's on and on. So it has to be by changing people's mind. But it means that you have to change the people first in leadership positions, those people who are involved in dissemination of news. Right now, on the surface, it looks like they're all in government and the media and all this, and they're all getting the wrong message. But subtly, our numbers are building. And you say, well, this is too frustrating. How am I going to get 50% to counteract the 50% who support these clowns? Well, if you're in a leadership position and you're leading it with ideas, you only have to, it only takes about 8 or 9% of the people to be presenting these views. Now, the big opportunity is coming, because this collapse that's coming is an opportunity, because it proves that their system is deeply flawed. The 20th century actually is living proof, remains living proof, that fascism and communism and authoritarianism and world wars, total failure, you know, and that something else has to be done. And I think the total failure of Keynesian deficit financing and refuting economic policy, that is so important. So if individuals who are wealthy want to really change the world, it's not to support certain candidates. It's to teach young people, you know, economic policy. And when the prevailing thinking comes, and the prevailing thinking has to be by Republicans and Democrats. The Republicans aren't going to, solve our problems, nor will the Democrats. It's going to be an attitude, because the attitude right now is that Keynesianism and deficit financing and printing money and central banking and militarism is the solution. But it's all coming apart. So it gives us a wonderful opportunity to defend a system that is based on the moral principle of personal liberties. And fortunately for us, that system is the most productive and the best chance ever to have peace and prosperity.
Absolutely. And just closing it off, it's not okay to put a gun to someone's head because you scraped your knee and make them fix it. So why should it be okay for a collective herd to put a gun to people's head and tell them that you have to fix it? I think that collectivism begets more collectivism, and the circular spectrum just continues on in a circle. It comes full circle. Fascism, communism, all forms of collectivism. And you do incredible work and have for so many years, Dr. Ron Paul. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Like what you see here at WHAM? Well, don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized and censored by YouTube. Also, don't forget to check our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan, if you please. And don't forget to find me at Josh Sigurdson on steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the social media where you get paid to blog and post in cryptocurrency. Thanks for watching, everyone. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.